Hello everyone, and welcome to your lecture on object-oriented programming. Now, object-oriented programming, or otherwise known as OOP, tends to be one of the major obstacles for beginners when they're first starting to learn Python. So there's many tutorials and lessons covering OOP, so feel free to Google search other lessons, and I've also put some links to other useful tutorials at the bottom of the Jupyter Notebook. If we scroll down here, there's 4 really nice other great resources on object-oriented programming to serve as extra learning material for you as you learn about object-oriented programming. So for this lesson, we're going to construct our knowledge of OOP by building on the following topics. We're going to start by learning about objects themselves and remembering what it means to be an object. Then we'll learn about using the class keyword. Then we'll create class attributes. We'll create methods within a class. We'll learn about inheritance. And then we'll learn about special methods for classes. We're going to take this very slowly and methodically, and most likely this object-oriented programming lecture will be broken up into smaller chunks so they're easier to digest, if you will. Okay, so we're going to start by remembering about basic Python objects. And before we begin with the live coding, I actually really encourage you to just go ahead and read through the entire Jupyter Notebook here before you actually see this video, just so you at least see everything once before jumping into the live code. Now, go ahead and after you're done reading this notebook, because there's actually a lot of text here for you to read that'll help your understanding, which I'm going to explain right now throughout the video lecture, but it's nice that you've at least seen it once before. Okay, let's go ahead and hop over to the actual coding now. So let's start the lesson by remembering about basic Python objects. So for example, let's make a list. Remember list, just use brackets. There we have our list. And remember how we could call methods on a list. So we have our object, L, which is a list, and I can call various methods on it. So I could say count how many times 2 shows up. And what we're basically going to be doing in this lecture is exploring how we could create an object type like a list. So we've learned about how to create functions, such as remember square, where you return that num to the power of 2. So we've learned about how to create functions, but you can imagine what would happen if you wanted to create an object like a list. Like how would you actually code that in Python? And that's where object-oriented programming is going to come into place. So in Python, let's go ahead and start learning about objects. So in Python, everything is an object. And remember this from previous lectures, we can use the type function to check the type of object something is. So, for instance, I have an integer 1. And if I use the type function on that, it'll tell me what type of object it is. It's an int object. That's its object type. What if I wanted to check the type for this list that I just made, which is 1, 2, 3? It's a type list, so that's the type of object it is. And let's just really drive the point home. Let's go ahead and make a tuple. 1, 2. It's a tuple. Let's go ahead and make a dictionary. Say k1, 1. Tells you type is dict. Okay, so now we know that everything in Python is an object, and we can actually use type to check the type of object something is. So we know all these things are objects, so how do we create our own object types? And that's where the class keyword comes in. So we'll be using the class keyword in order to create our own object types. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop this first part of the lecture here. Make sure you read through this entire Jupyter Notebook before continuing on with the other lectures in the object-oriented programming series or section of the course. And keep in mind that in Python, everything is an object. And to drive that point home, I will show one more example of everything being an object. So remember we could create functions, square, again, return num to the power of 2. So even that square function in Python, it is an object itself. And what type of object it is? It's a function object. So keep in mind that everything in Python is an object. And now we're going to learn how to use the class keyword to create our own objects. And object-oriented programming in Python is going to be highly dependent on that class keyword. Okay, So make sure you read this entire Jupyter notebook before continuing on, and then you'll come in fully prepped for the upcoming videos. Okay, and just a quick reminder, there's also at the bottom of this Jupyter notebook 4 other great resources on object-oriented programming. And the reason I'm stressing so much that you read this and take your time with it is that a lot of people get stuck on object-oriented programming when they're first learning about Python. And it's a bit of a learning curve, but once you get it, you'll feel that it suddenly clicks and you understand why you're using object-oriented programming. Okay, so in the next video, we'll explain about class.